International conflicts have forced hundreds of thousands of people to flee their homelands over centuries, forming migration routes that shape today's global diplomatic policies. With widespread conflict across the Middle East, many people risk all they have to get to Europe, seeking safety and a better future, by sea and by land. And although the most common route to Europe is across the Mediterranean Sea, a new one appears to be opening through the border between Belarus and the EU. It extends from the Baltic states of Latvia and Lithuania to Poland. Brussels has accused Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko of attempting to destabilize the bloc with a hybrid war, using migrants as a weapon. I'm Fasten in Vilnius. More than 4,000 migrants have entered Lithuania from Belarus so far this year. And footage recently released by the Lithuanian border guard services apparently shows how migrants are being forced into the country by Belarusian security forces. EU officials have held emergency talks to discuss an integrated response. While the country has declared an emergency, I've traveled to the Lithuanian capital to see what lies ahead, diplomatically and also at a humanitarian level. Lithuanian Prime Minister Ingrida Simonyte talks to Al Jazeera. Lithuanian Prime Minister Ingrida Simonyte, thank you so much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you for having me.
You've called it a hybrid war with Belarus. People from Iraq, from different countries being sent deliberately to the border of your country. How is this organized? Who is behind it? And what is the role of President Alexander Lukashenko in this?
First of all, they are invited to Belarus, and we've seen the attempts of Lukashenko regime to get more routes that would fly over to Minsk. We hear about negotiations with countries, for example, like Pakistan and others.
That's what he's doing right
this
now.
Opening of new routes. We know that the travel agencies that are close to regime, because all sort of business is close to regime in that country, are also part of it. And when we see on Belarusian propaganda TV a military guy commenting the option of opening up of Belarus as a tourist destination, this sounds a little bit weird. Not mentioning the people, the uniformed people that we physically see at our borders, also in this attempt of people from Iraq or other countries who attempt to cross the border illegally.
Are you convinced that Alexander Lukashenko and Belarusian officials are personally involved?
He simply declared that he will flood European Union, this is a quote, with drugs and migrants, and that was his threat. So, of course, you have to take all the words of Lukashenko with a dose of critical thinking, but...
So when he did that threat, right,
yeah.
Did you believe that he was actually going to do it?
Well, you can never rule out anything he is saying, given that we already seen a number of illegal migrants hired in comparison to last year. And there is a video that I think was widely seen also on different media resources, where actually uniformed people in this riot police uniform were trying to push people into the country, and as a matter of fact, they themselves have crossed the border and they themselves have committed a criminal offense under our criminal code. This is not just the game of Lukashenko or his blackmail on European Union, trying to press European Union to sort of lift up the sanctions that are really hurting his regime, but there is more to this, because in this time of the year, a little bit later, but the preparations are ongoing, there is a military exercise where Belarusian and Russian armies are participating.
It's Zapad.
Zapad, yes. And this is not the first time this is happening, and every time this is happening, we are at high level of alert, because we know that for some countries, unfortunately, the borders are a conditional thing, and we've seen the proof to that in 2008 in Sakartvelo or in 2014 in Ukraine.
You say Lithuania is alert. In what way are you prepared?
Well,
for an incident, a military aggression, anything that you just mentioned?
This is something that is not only for us, but also for our international partners, and we are in a very close and day-to-day cooperation on the situation.
So are there, for example, reinforcements from NATO at the moment in Lithuania to prevent a possible
Well, I don't think
attack?
that I can speak about the details, but I know that we are on a very close cooperation with our partners on day-to-day business. And of course, everybody is watching that closely. We have people who are already present here, and this level of information or alertness of our partners, I think, is at the right level.
You really stood up for the opposition in Belarus, right? You have actually given protection to opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. You have stood up also for the human rights violations, against the human rights violations happening in Belarus. How far is Lithuania willing to go to keep that position? Because it's costing you a lot at the same time, right? Migrants coming into the country, you have to deal with more than 4,000 people at the moment. Sanctions, Belarus, of course, was also an important partner, trading partner for Lithuania. So how far can this pressure go until, you can't go any further?
Well, I think that I find it puzzling when people say that we are supportive to Belarusian opposition. I would claim that it's Lukashenko who is opposition to his own nation. And in this case, I very much doubt that there is any majority behind Lukashenko anymore, because similar things happened 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and it was a habit of Lukashenko to jail some people, then trade them for some benefits, and that's how he kept going. But I think after 2020, there is a certain point of no return. And this is not Lithuania's position. I mean, Lithuania is in this position, definitely, and we are strong advocates of this position, but this is a position of European Union, and there was no disagreement in the bloc.
But you're next door. You're the neighbor,
so
right?
Physically, we are next door, yes, but the same arguments held where there was a debate about Russia imposing sanctions, I would say, on its own people after Crimea, where European Union imposed sanctions and Russia imposed sanctions that made food more expensive, or some products that usually came from European Union inaccessible for Russian people. So this was not a sanction against European Union, but was sanctions against Russia's people. But still, there were impacts on the trade that we had. A big part of re-export, because geographically we are close, a big part of re-export went to Russia. There was a decent share of agricultural production that went to Russia. And we had this debate, isn't that too expensive for us? But, when you deal with the markets that are no rule of law countries, that are not stable regimes where you can be sure that your rights will be protected, that there is a court system that is functioning, that the private property is respected, then you might get higher returns, but the risks that you have are usually much higher than in this boring Europe where we recommend our businesses and our companies to put preference. So there is still some business interest, but people should know that they come with high risk.
But why do you do it? Why have you stood up so strongly against what's happening in Belarus? Is it a human rights issue for you, democracy issue, or is it also a security issue?
We know that when you have no rule of law just behind your borders, it's always a danger for your own interest. So that is why we've been vocal for Eastern Partnership for so many years. We think that we are a good model to watch, that actually you can freeze the country in that Soviet type of economy where everything is under central planning and it looks like a big, you know, a big sort of mechanical thing. But within it, you see that while income in Baltic countries are increasing by 20% in 5 years, you have a decrease of real income in Belarus of 20% during the same time.
But you're on the front line, right?
Yes.
You can only do this. Lithuania is a relatively small country. You can only do this if you have the backing, the full backing of the European Union. And do you have that?
European Union had took a very reasonable stance and very reasonable negotiation position, for example, with Iraq, which is very important because our arguments, so to say, in front of countries of origin are somewhat limited maybe, but European Union has quite strong arguments when it deals with the countries of origin.
Yeah, what you mean is that there was a contact with Iraq, right, to prevent the direct flights from Baghdad to Minsk to continue, so people couldn't so easily go to Belarus as before.
It's not just about the flights and limitation of flights, because I don't know how aware the government was about how the people are being used for the goals that have nothing to do with the welfare of those people. At this situation, they are just used as instruments for very evil intentions that is by Lukashenko regime.
Let's talk about the people, right? We've also met them in several camps. Of course, yeah, Lithuania, a small country, not really prepared, right, for more than 4,000 people arriving. So the situations are quite difficult for them. People have told us, like, we escape a prison, like they described the situation in northern Iraq as living in a prison. Now we're here in a prison as well. How is this possible? We are in Europe and we're locked up. How are you going to deal with all these people and their humanitarian needs?
It's not that this country has a very big problem to accommodate 4,000 people, no. But because during the Belarusian crisis, after the election farce in August, I don't know, a couple of thousand people came here. Some may be crossing the border illegally, like those people, some with special humanitarian visas. And it's not a problem for this country, whatever small it is, to host 4,000 people. The problem is that we were never on whatever route of migration. So the cases that were happening on our border were either easily manageable for us, or they were manageable at the border itself. Now we have a different situation when people from different countries, Iraq, Iran, African countries who've studied in Minsk, and all of a sudden decided that they maybe might also try to cross the border, decided to come here, but they know they are doing this illegally. I mean, they know they are doing this illegally. Yes, there is a technical...
No, they didn't, because they said we got a visa in Minsk, and they were promised that it was easy then to cross into
but
Europe.
This is not Minsk. So, this is not Belarus.
No, but the people were not well informed about that.
And I think they were not well informed intentionally, because as a matter of fact, they were misinformed.
But if you say we can actually handle more than 4,000 people, why are they in such a dire situation then right now?
Well, the problem is that there is a procedure that you need to undergo even if you want to request an asylum. And from what I can guess, there will be a limited number of people who will actually be able to ground their request of political asylum because they can be persecuted for political views or some other activism. Most of people most probably are coming because they just want to live in a different country, most probably somewhere in Western Union. So this is not a ground for asylum. But there are, of course, procedures that we need to undergo, and we will be undergoing. Yes, there is a logistical issue that we need to host people somewhere until their requests are being processed.
But you think they're being treated in a proper humanitarian way?
We know that there are all sorts of problems because nobody was prepared to have a big number of people with kids of different health conditions, not speaking a language that we can speak, and there are all sorts of problems that come from it. But we are trying to move as soon as we can, as move as we can in trying to make those conditions better. There are so many people who live in the border crossing points. We are trying to rent as many houses, model houses as we can to sort of put people in a better situation. We have a special center in our country, in Jonava, that deals with people who are already under integration programs, and they know how to teach the kids, they know how to treat the families, they have this experience, but they do not have a capacity to locate them. So we are increasing this capacity, and as soon as we do it, in a couple of weeks, we will shift people from those places where they are. We are trying to arrange interpreters because a very big problem is that people are with no documents, so we need to identify them, to sort of register them, to know who they are, what are their special features, and what we can do about it.
But at the same time, the government has decided to not let anyone enter anymore, right? At the moment, since the beginning of August, people have been pushed back. More than 1,000 people have been sent back from the border. What is the legal base for this? Because Lithuania has also adopted the UN Convention for Refugees. So the Red Cross and other international organizations are worried that you're violating this international agreement.
Well, I know this debate, but there are so many international obligations that our country is trying to fulfill. And one of the obligations is to guard the eastern border of the European Union and the Schengen Agreement.
And also support people's human rights.
Yes, but then we need to see what is the proper way to do this. There is a convention about the human right, but this convention does not say that anyone can cross whatever border at any point of time because they will to do so. If you think that you have a ground to appeal for asylum, then there are legal ways of loading this document against the Lithuanian government in a border crossing point and also now at the embassies. And Belarus is not a country that I would deem to be unsafe for Iraqi people who are coming there with visas for touristic purposes.
I understand what you mean, but at the moment people are being pushed back. The Belarusians are not letting them back in, they're pushing them back again, so people are basically locked up in the middle between the two countries. Warning shots are being fired, there were flares being heard by the Belarusian officials. I wouldn't call that a safe situation to send people into.
Well, yes, but we also need to ensure that this does not open up new ways and means for Lukashenko to invent how they can press on our country more.
But then these people are victims of a political situation that they have no understanding of, but they're still human beings, right?
Yes, this is something I agree with, but there are border crossing points where legally you can present your asylum case. Because if this is like, you know, nobody's guarding the border. So then we are just administrating whatever number of people are coming here illegally, and I must stress that. And I think the big problem is that people are in Belarus legally, in contrast to what is happening here. They are legally. They had visas, they had documents that some of them decided to abandon because they were recommended to do so. But this is a very delicate situation.
What I'm struggling to understand is the double standardness in a way. Belarusian people who have been fleeing the country are most welcome here. Right? You accept them here. The people who are coming from Iraq and other countries, maybe even also from Afghanistan, are being sent back into a situation, into a country that you already have described as being unsafe. So it's a double kind of treatment.
Well, I would say that Belarus is an unsafe country for Belarus journalists, civil society activists, and other people who have a dissenting opinion from the regime. This, I say, is an unsafe country. But take those people who come to Belarus on their own will. They buy a visa, they buy a trip, and Well, as far as they come there as tourists, as is their sort of major intention, then I don't think there is a major safety concern. And this is quite different. I would not see that as a double standard. I would see
the shooting at the border doesn't work.
Well, shooting at the border does not help. But first and foremost, people come to the country. And this would be a very smart thing to rethink that twice, because I know that there are still options that are still marketed among Iraqi people to come to Belarus via, for example, connecting routes in other places like Istanbul or others. But does anyone want to find himself or herself in this situation? I don't know. I would not advise to do.
You're now also concerned, of course, about what's happening in Afghanistan, right? And you already said, or the government said, there are concerns that Lukashenko will use these people also to come to your border. What would you do with them?
Well, I would not relate the Afghanistan situation directly to Lukashenko's will of doing or not doing something. Yes, he can try to deal with Taliban and open up the routes from Kabul to Minsk, but still, I think the major concern is that there will be a broader problem with migration, and this will not be a specifically Lithuanian problem, but I think this is something the whole European Union should be prepared also on traditional routes of migration.
But you're the new route, and it's a possibility, right?
So what we want to say that there is no new route.
How are you going to prevent that they will come?
Because people who are coming here for political reasons, and we know there might be people coming from Afghanistan for political reasons, there are people that we want ourselves to help them in coming to our country, they still will be able to come, because this is what the conventions about refugees is about.
You are planning to build this long fence, right, 500 kilometers long at your 760 kilometer border with Belarus. You need money for that, right, from the EU. During a meeting with the interior ministers, there was this call for money to build this wall. Will this sort of be possible, that the EU will make this country into sort of a fortress against the outside world, or?
Unfortunately, it can happen. I don't know whether EU will rethink the EU stance to finance this sort of investment. So we are determined to implement this project wherever. I think European Union will have to rethink its strategy, because it's not just the problem of the countries that are at the border, because usually they would serve as a transit countries for other countries with substantially higher level of welfare to finally host the people who are illegally crossing. And if this becomes a very easy way, then we all know that this is not what is in the interest of European Union, because there should be rules.
Rethink in what way? You say the EU should rethink its regulations?
Well, I think if there is a need, and of course this can be disputed and debated and agreed upon some special mechanism, but if there is a need to have a physical border, then to my opinion, it also should be considered eligible for finance.
Does the EU also support the pushbacks that the government is doing right now?
Well, I don't think that somebody could support activities where, some people are feeling maybe unsafe and disappointed. But there is a balance between two things, because European Union would not support us in not being able to protect the border either.
We met a 17-year-old young man from Iraq, from northern Iraq. His name was Ali Yassim, in one of the camps, and he said, my dream is to study in Lithuania and wants to become a chemist. Mm-hmm. What are his chances?
Well, there are visas for studying as well.
But he's in one of the camps right now.
Yeah, well, he might be in one of the camps right now, so we will definitely talk to him as to all the other people and see what options are there. We have students who have been studying in our universities, also from Iraq and Syria and other countries, medical studies and others, so there are legal ways of coming to countries.
So Lithuania is open to become a multicultural society?
Well, you know, Lithuania is a quite multicultural society for ages, because historically there were people who were from different nationalities and who are sort of a heritage of our country, being that Tatars, for example, or Karayims, or other people that might sound quite exotic for a European country. And they all lived together, and there was no, because the whole Grand Duchy that was there for some time was a multinational country, and
because the people here are quite reluctant, right? We spoke to some people, they say we don't want these migrants here.
I don't think that people are sort of, you know, hostile. I would say that the problem is the whole situation around this illegal migration. It's not a problem that a guy from Iraq will study chemistry at the university, because there are people who are studying and nobody is sort of very much caring about this fact, because it's normal to meet different people who can come here for touristic purposes or whatever. But the problem is what we see at the borders, because it shakes a little bit the society, where you see a big number. You do not know whether that would stop, what will happen to people, what impact will it have on our daily lives. As soon as the situation is sorted out and the government is able to sort of arrange the living condition, the asylum procedures, the interpreters, the school for kids, the other things that are necessary, and people are a little bit dispersed to better conditions, I don't think this will hold.
Lithuanian Prime Minister Ingrida, thank you so much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you.